Hi folks, I'm Spencer, and on today's episode of Cult Mania we're getting spooky with Japanese found footage horror movie Noroi The Curse. Ooh. To be honest, I've been wanting to check out this film for as long as I can remember. I mean, it's been on so many scariest horror films, scariest found footage horror films, scariest Japanese film lists, and it's been annoying because ever since it came out in 2005, it's never had a physical release in the West. And it still hasn't, but the lovely folks over at Shudder have put it up to stream, so you can watch it now. The film was directed by Koji Shiraishi, probably now best known for directing the Ringu Ju-on crossover Sadako vs Kayako. The film follows Masafumi Kobayashi, a documentary filmmaker who's interested in the paranormal. We're informed at the very start that after he finished his latest project, The Curse, he mysteriously vanished and his house burnt down with his wife's body being found inside. We're then thrust into watching The Curse and we attempt to piece together what on earth happened leading up to his disappearance. I don't really want to say too much else about the plot of the film. I think the best way to go in is not knowing too much so that you can enjoy sort of piecing it all together for yourself. Kobayashi, as played by Jin Muraki, is actually a really good horror protagonist and an even better found footage protagonist. He really does feel like just some guy who enjoys making paranormal documentaries. He doesn't, descend into screaming into the ether, which seems to happen a lot in found footage films. He's just got this very down-to-earth, normal bloke status. I mean, there is a fantastic bit in which a crazy woman shouts at him, and when she leaves, he just sort of turns to look into the camera, and it's almost like something out of The Office or something. He just turns and has this look of like, why do I keep doing this? And it's just great, because that happens really earlier, and you just sort of go with him from that point, because you're like, I can relate to you. You're not some teenager making stupid comments and screaming all the time. The other standout performance in the film is from actress Marika Matsumoto, who I didn't realise when I started watching this is actually playing herself, which really adds to the sort of realism of the film. She has a much trickier role because she's often closer to the more supernatural things that are happening in the film. But similarly, she manages to remain restrained. She doesn't just turn into sort of screaming crazy lady, at least not early on. So it does mean that when you get her sort of screaming and being genuinely terrified towards the end, it means that you believe it, you sort of go with it that this is terrifying because she didn't scream her head off when a pop fell over or something like that. Honest though, everyone in the film gives a pretty sturdy performance. I mean, even there is one character that is so much more over the top and so easily could be too silly. Even that character manages to fit well within the version of reality that the film has built up. I was never pulled out of the film by any of the performances. The fact that the film is a documentary, it is a completed documentary rather than just being the scraps of found footage, is really important. I mean, yes, we are generally just watching sort of blurry videotape footage because that is what the gods of found footage want, and we do get like scenes of night vision because, again, you have to have night vision because it's found footage. These things are used effectively, they're used sparingly, and more importantly, they're mixed in with other types of media. You get sequences that are of a chat show, you get sequences which are of a TV show in which kids with ESP are being sort of examined, and it's got really cheesy graphics all over it. And you get some sort of spooky 16mm because, again, 16mm is spooky. This really helps to make it feel like a documentary, something believable, because you have all these sources. But more than that, it means that the visual language of the film isn't just shaky, blurry camera. You are constantly being given new things to look at, new styles to look at, and that really helps keep a viewer engaged. I mean, there's definitely one point, probably more than one point, where I had to remind myself that this wasn't a real documentary, that this was a faked film. And I think that's really impressive, especially when I was going in sort of writing down notes of being like, ooh, this shot is very cleverly designed, and then I just went with it. The only problem this does come with is sometimes when there are graphics on screen, obviously they're written in Japanese, and they've had to put the English subtitles over the top of them, and those can sometimes be quite difficult to read. But I mean, I don't feel like I missed anything. It's just something where you suddenly have to go, oh, what does that say? What does that say? And hope that it doesn't leave the screen too quickly. Again, the fact that we're watching a completed documentary is very helpful, because the film can have a soundtrack. I mean, it's not much of a soundtrack. We're mainly just getting sort of low-end synthy rumbles that go along with some of the more supernatural things, or, you know, there might be someone in the distance and they get a bit of a whoom to show that they're a bit creepy. But it does help to sort of heighten some of those moments, and it does mean as well that in moments where it's just people driving or people walking, you know, you get some montages, they get a score to go with them, and it helps to keep the atmosphere rather than we're just not listening to, you know, people's feet as they trek around. The only problem is there is one track in this which is just the theme from John Carpenter's The Thing, played ever so slightly differently, and that did take me out of the film a bit, because I was like, oh wait, Kurt Russell's going to be around the corner, he'll save us. What's that? What's that? But generally, all of these things put together really make the film engaging. I mean, it's nearly 2 hours long, and I was never bored, I never lost interest particularly. I mean, it really helps because the film slowly drip feeds you more information. It gives you clues as we're going along, and that means that you're constantly, or at least I was, trying to piece together each little moment to see how it all comes together. I think there was some stuff that I knew about the film going in that I was sort of like, ooh, that's important early on. But I think if you go into it blank, it's a great way of just trying to put it together yourself and seeing at the end whether you actually figured it out right. And I think the main thing is, what you are piecing together is really bloody creepy. I mean, it's been quite a long time since a film genuinely sent like a little shiver up my spine. And the best thing about The Curse is that it does it with little things. It's not big things where there is, you know, a big face in the back of a shot. It could just be little things that sort of dawn on you. That's the thing. It's when you start figuring things out and you kind of wish you hadn't. Noroi is all about a sort of slow accumulation of dread or of unease. It's about the film. It's really difficult to explain what it's like watching the film. It sort of just slowly sort of seeps under your skin, and you might not even realise early on when little tiny things are happening how much it's putting you on edge. I didn't. It sort of dawned on me much later on that I was sort of picking at my nails because I was just uncomfortable. It's just this sort of weird moment of like, oh no, which is great. I mean, I don't remember the last time something did this to me, and I mean, it does go for it later on. There's some really quite creepy stuff and some really dark stuff that goes on later on, but I think the most impressive thing is when it's just doing little things that slowly build up how uncomfortable you are. I mean, this does mean that if you are coming to the film for sort of boo haunted house scares, you aren't going to find them, and you'll have got way too bored by the time anything genuinely sort of startling happens. But it's nice to have it sounds really silly, it's nice to have a film that made me feel so unnerved without necessarily doing it in a really obvious manner. I do think it's great that this film is now getting a broader release, because it does do some really interesting things with found footage. I mean, I know it's not the only found footage film that is sort of based around an investigation, you know, Last Broadcast does that as well. But I've not seen another film do it this convincingly. I mean, like I said, I forgot that it was a film and just went with it as being a documentary. Which, I don't know, perhaps that just says that I'm really gullible. But I mean, I can imagine that whilst it's not been on streaming, if you wanted to see this, it would have, you know, you'd have had to have got it illegally. And I can imagine if you actually stumbled on this film on the internet, knowing nothing about it, you could very easily just be taken in that it is real. Up until a point. But, you know, it's so much effort has been put into maintaining this air of realism. I mean, there are no credits in the film. There are only a few little credits for the fake documentary. And I love that they've put that much dedication into it. I do think this is possibly one of the most sort of unsettling or unnerving films I've seen. I mean, it is not sort of poo your pants scary. Actually, I mean, it did properly affect me. I mean, I watched it at 10 in the morning, sort of 10 till 12. It was quite sunny. My dog was in the room, and it still managed to get me. It got me to the point that during the sort of build up to the end thing, my dog was asleep and she started barking in her sleep, and it proper unsettled me because I was like, oh no, the nasty curse thing is coming to get me. So I think if you are a fan of found footage, or you are a fan of Japanese sort of supernatural horror, you know, your Ringus or your Ju-ons or your Dark Waters, this is definitely worth checking out, because you're seeing a lot of those themes done ever so slightly differently and done in a different mode. Just be ready that it is quite a slow watch, that you've got to pay attention, that it's a film that you get more out of the more attention you put into it. But that's just my opinion. Have you seen Noroi The Curse? Did it genuinely unnerve you, or did you just think it was really boring? Let me know down in the comments. Like and subscribe so you don't miss any more videos, and I'll see you next time.